and use it to solve a real problem. And if the tool is not solving a real problem, well, I guess I don't need that. Look what else I can do with my time.
You know, one of the problems we have to deal with as reality is that the people who manage to get to the top and profit the most, a good many of them are psychopaths. And we have yet to conquer the power of greed. And those are realities that we have to come to grips with and face, because those are people with real power and with real drive, and of course callous indifference towards humanity in general. And so we can talk about spiritual transformation and all these other things, but we have, you know, to be revolutionists, it is probably, in one way or another, is the only way anything like that's going to be accomplished, because we're dealing with people who really don't care about humanity.
Well, I would resist the temptation to demonize the heads of corporations.
Well, not
the line between good and evil cuts through every human heart.
Well, I'm not demonizing the heads of corporations, but
what do you call them? Psychopaths.
No,
these companies exist because they do wonderful things. They offer incredible good that has never been offered before, but they also offer, you know, the prospect of incredible evil that's never been unleashed before. So yes, people are suffering, the environment's suffering. But the goods are real, so I would not want to say, you know, we have to characterize these new developments as psychopathic.
Well, you're going a little bit, you're losing yourself in your own rhetoric, because that's not what I said. So don't wander too far off into your own rhetoric. We have to face the fact that we do have people with great money and great power who are psychopaths, and they don't care about all of this. So, you know, just our own spiritual transformation is only just a vague beginning of what we have to try to influence the world with, you know. But we're dealing with people who are quite resistant to everything we're doing, and that's another problem. You know, the deregulation is based on the fact that greed has been conquered. That's the problem. You know, we can't go off into some kind of utopian.
Well, I don't think about being a utopian, and I resist the idea that there are monsters out there that we have to defeat. This is the backward-looking solution that these demagogic politicians are bringing forward, right? The demon is the immigrant, so let's stop letting people into the country, right? Or the demon is this country. Yeah. I don't think the demon is psychopaths who are running corporations.
Well, not all corporations are being run like psychopaths. Nobody suggested that. But there are people with a great deal of power who really don't care.
One thing I was going to say is one thing we all share, Anglican, Roman Catholic, and Orthodox, is a tradition in which our particular traditions have consistently engaged larger political issues that confront us. The temptation is we become subservient to the interests of power, and often the reaction to that is a retreat into pietism. But we all come from different ways, you have different words for it, but it's a magisterial tradition in that our faith is a kingdom tradition. And one temptation is, you often say, if you dance with Caesar, Caesar takes the lead. And that's the great danger if the church gets too involved in politics, it gets co-opted by it. And often the response says you retreat from politics because it's nasty and dirty and you compromise and all these Judas type things. That's equally problematic. But we all share a tradition of trying to think through the relationship of spirituality to public responsibility. And in that, there is a form of prophetic ecological vision I think we can share by bringing together the mother lode of our three traditions as we face the environmental crisis we face today, and walking again that middle way, which is engaged with the bigger political issues, but in a prophetic, not a co-opted way, but on the other hand, not retreating from the fray, because that just facilitates what's going on. And I think this is where Roman Catholics and certainly Orthodox and Anglicans can come together, because we have a shared history in terms of public responsibility. It's the Lord's Prayer, you know, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as in heaven, thine is the power." You know, I mean, this is part of what we share as a communal heritage of 2,000 years or more. So that's just a comment.
Niels, do you have a comment on what's here? Pardon?
I have something to say.
Sure.
Chris, so you're very much focused on sharing profits and financial goods with other people, which is very good. But I think it has to go side by side with sharing also the love for other people. So we can't just focus on financial good. I think that's something
No, I think you're right. But you know, the worker deserves a living wage. I mean, global poverty is a huge problem. And I think the way the economic system is rigged to keep the poor and to profit off them is the great injustice that we're called to address. And yeah, Wayne.
I have a question that maybe anyone wants to comment on, and it relates to a theological, kind of a foundational theological understanding about the creation story, and that's Genesis 1 verse 28. There is a Hebrew word in there transliterated R-A-D-A-H that specifically means many times, more times than not, in the rest of the Old Testament, rape. And it has to do with domination or subjection of the creation. And there was a very famous talk given by Lynn White back in 1967, a medievalist, and he laid the entire blame for the then in 67 environmental crisis at the feet of Christians. I would be curious to know some responses.
Well, I think there's some very good essays and good research that's been done directly with Lynn White on his his understandings, and he's contributed since then a much more a real clarification about that. And there's some good essays in a wonderful book called The Ecology of Transfiguration, I think it is. And it's it was a real relief for me to see that there was a correction made with him in
But back to Radah, back to that Hebrew word. So what you say, when right embedded in the creation story is rape. You could put it that way, that started.
I think when, as Father Mills has said, the various responses to Lynn White's controversial essayistics, he's pointed out that he's taken an extreme read of the Hebrew word, and that in fact it's a far more nuanced word, and he's taken the worst approach to interpreting metaphorically that word. And as in most languages, you can get layered meanings, and he had an ideological agenda. And of course, the only Christian he liked in that essay was Francis of Assisi as the corrective to the. So it's a very skewed essay, and he uses even Hebrew language to reinforce a thesis which is problematic to begin with. But the impact of it continues.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a good.
Yeah, it gets referenced often.
Yeah, David,
and not the correct. I mean, I'm glad to hear that.
David's looking a little anxious there. He has a question.
Well, just a brief footnote to this. The great American rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik makes the argument in a really curious book called The Lonely Man of Faith that there are two Adams. There's Adam 1 and Adam 2. So as you know, there are these two creation stories. And that Adam 1 is speaking to the gift of the human nature to explore, to extract, to engage, to make, homo faber, all of that part of the human nature. And Adam 2 is speaking to worship, contemplation, prayer, regard, blessing. Both are there. Both are there in us. So his argument is that that's what's going on in that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, that's helpful. I'll get this spelling later.
Sure, I'll probably be talking about this a little bit tomorrow.
Sounds good.
You could argue, though, that regardless of the roots and the reality of the words, that Christians of various stripes have used the subdue language,
No question.
like, let's say, exploited the language to do exactly what you're saying, right?
Sure.
That
Hugely so.
you know, and especially if you have an apocalyptic theology that said, look at, what does it matter if we subdue the earth, pull the oil out, drain it back into the lake, say Jesus is coming next week anyway, or at least in our, you know, so that whole theological package can end up using the word exactly like that, even if it was never intended to be.
I'm doing a course this semester, Religion, Nature, and Science, and one part of the book looks at how Genesis has been misused by the church, disenchanted the world, and then the whole other Christian response in which it reads it totally different and applies it totally different. And so there's, what Brad is saying is absolutely right, is there has been a misinterpretation and a misapplication that leads to a disenchantment of the environment and an abuse and a taking advantage of it, means of subduing. And there's a whole other tradition within Christianity that says, in fact, that can be translated very, very differently. Shepherding, caring, tending, even a more nuanced notion of dominion in terms of caring, not dominating. So this particular book is a part of it. It looks at the two thinkers, the ideas, their exegesis, and their applications that give you two Christian traditions that are at total odds on the environment.
And maybe just as a quick footnote on that is there was a very noted evangelical leader who many attribute the withdrawal by the U.S. from the climate accord to this person's influence, a reconstructionist who's voluminously writing. And part of his theology just simply says, God has promised, and reiterated it at the time of Noah, that he will care for the creation. We have no need to. That's basically his thesis. And he's prolific in his output, and many attribute his influence and the little whatever it is, it's like an agency that he runs, for being the most influential on besides Trump's denial of climate change alone. But anyway, you know, this is an interesting.
Can I just summarize the argument that I've been making? I think I reacted strongly to your remarks, Archbishop Lazar, because I'm convinced it's a mistake for Christians to give into this temptation to demonize other people. Right? If we personalize the problem of the environmental crisis, if we personalize it by identifying the monsters or the psychopaths, I think we're going to fail at what we're called to do. I think the problem we're facing is named by this phrase I used. I got it from the Pope. The globalization of the technocratic paradigm. Think of it as like the operating system that the globe is running on. It doesn't have to be, but by default, it's the default operating system that's running. So don't blame the people who are sucked up into it. I don't think it's helpful to characterize them a certain way, create this tribe pitted against this tribe, we're against the monsters and the psychopaths. I'd rather say, let's be positive, and as Christians offer people a different example. We've got a different operating system that you can try running in your community. We're not trying to get a global platform monopoly, some kind of, colonial version of Christianity. No, we want to solve real problems in our local community. So we've got a spiritual community that can be a model for you, a source of renewal. Become a positive model locally and imitate that. So you don't have to, draw lines of opposition, personalize and characterize people a certain way. I don't think that's productive at all. But I think positive example is the way to go, a new paradigm.
I think that's what I said in the first place, isn't it?
Well, I guess I'm a slow learner. I have to catch up to your wisdom.
I think you didn't understand what I said.
I think we, just to make a little addition there, is we have to recognize the third person more, with this sense of being in it together, and respecting each other and really loving each other, and so that it's more than just me as an individual trying to solve the problem. We really do have to touch each other, make shared life together somehow, see? We have to feel that interdependence. And it has to be, part of that, it has to be God. And so somehow there's a new experience of God in leaving room for the other, even if the other is your enemy. You see? So we, the way to that is to be more humble, to be more open.
I would just add that what I would say is, I don't disagree with anything that you said. As a journalist and as a person who it's my vocation to investigate, challenge authority, present information to our audience in order to give them the information that they need in order to make civic decisions, that we do have to acknowledge that what's happening in real time, there are corporate heads, lobbyists, political interests who have their thumb on the scale, who are advocating, who are frankly paying, in a sense, in this legalized bribery system, in the United States anyway, of getting their interests and getting their agendas put ahead of those of the masses. And we feel an obligation as journalists to expose that corruption, to shine light on those things, because we internally, as a group, as Christians, we can certainly pray, and we should always set a positive and good example, but we also have to be cognizant of the reality that there are forces at work who are proactively working against our efforts, and they're doing so in our political systems, they're doing so culturally, they're doing so through media, entertainment, ways that we disseminate information. And it is helpful sometimes to identify who those people are, and then allow the citizenry to make their own choices about whom they're going to vote, or what products they're going to consume and why. And I don't think it's an either-or scenario. I think it's all of the above. We should be wary of those sheep and those wolves in sheep's clothing, but we should also be careful not to allow our anger or our it's something I tell my friends all the time. Sometimes being right isn't enough. And we have to utilize all of our ability to identify problems where they are, but yes, no, not make them political or not make them personal, but at the same time be realistic about the forces that are at work, counteracting the things that we're trying to do. And I think that we have the ability to do both. We don't have to demonize anyone, but at the same time we can have clear eyes in everything that we want to do.
Realize that there are people opposed to what we're trying to accomplish.
So, sure. And we can do so in a Christ-like manner, respectfully, as our Lord did. And we can also do so in a way that energizes people to move towards justice, which I think we're all in favor of. So on that note, I want to thank all of you for attending. Professor Ron Dart, Professor Chris Morrissey, Father Niels Nellis, thank you all for coming here, for sharing your wonderful words, your insights, for having a robust, dynamic conversation. These sometimes can be difficult conversations, but they must be had. And they must be had in the spirit of Christian love and Christian generosity. And I'm so grateful that we were all able to do this tonight. And so let us go forward and continue this great work. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you all.
invite everyone tomorrow to the Trinity Western University because some of our other Christian brethren will be there from different Christian traditions to add their words and perspectives, and it'll be well worth hearing what they have to say and what the others have to say as well.
And